Hi, this is Roger from Upswung. In this video, we're going to talk about how to make a permanent foundation for an MB832 manual barrier gate operator. First thing to consider is soil conditions. Is the soil solid, like an adobe clay, or is it sandy, or just normal topsoil? That plays an important part in how far down you go with the excavation. In general, you can go down 24 inches to 30 inches, and that's suitable for most soils. If you have any question about the soil, I'd strongly recommend that you contact a soils engineer or civil engineer and ask about the general way that foundations are placed in your area. Every area is different, so it's worth the time and effort to seek out somebody that's knowledgeable or a local contractor that can help you determine how deep the foundation should go. But generally, just for the weight and ballast of the concrete, 24 inches or greater is adequate. Another factor to determine how deep to dig the foundation is your frost line. In the Northeast, the frost line can be over 30 inches or more, and you must dig or excavate below the frost line so that you do not have freeze lifting. And what happens is if you don't dig deep enough, water or moisture gets underneath the concrete pour. It's above the frost line, and so it freezes, and when it freezes, it freeze lifts the foundation and causes it to lift out of the ground and become crooked. So you want to make sure that you dig an excavation hole deeper than your frost line. If you do need to dig a deep hole, again, say you're in the Northeast, you may want to use a 16-inch auger and just drill a 16-inch pure hole, which is a little bit more efficient than trying to dig out a square hole with a backhoe or some other equipment. An auger works great for that. So generally, if you can dig a 16-inch diameter pure hole and take it down below your frost line, that way, that works great. And also in areas where you have sandy soil, where you drill into the sand and maybe use a sonotube to keep the sand from filling back into the hole. That's another way to approach having to excavate a deep hole. Next, take some 2x6 or 2x8s and form a 24-inch or greater form to sit on top of your excavation so that you can pour the concrete in the excavation and out of the excavation into the form boards, and then screed it off and finish it in the normal manner, and also radius the edges, makes it look nice. And so just general finishing once you get it all the way filled up, and try to do it in a continuous pour. Looking at the drawing, you'll see that there's rebar in the concrete, and basically it's number 4 or half-inch rebar, 6 pieces of it, 3 in one direction and 3 in the opposite direction or perpendicular direction. And you need to allow 2 inches of cover all around the rebar to 1.5 inches. So basically you don't want any rebar anywhere in this pour exposed to air or dirt. So everything has to have a certain amount of clearance inside the forms and in the excavation so that no rebar touches soil so it doesn't later rust out. And also you'll see in the drawing that there's some vertical rebar that's hooked, and that's just to help tie it all together. And that's just another way to ensure that, especially if you do 2 pours and you don't do one continuous pour, that it's all tied together. So there's 2 number 4 rebars that go down to through the excavation near the bottom, but remember, always 2 inches or at least 1.5 inches of cover around all rebar. Another thing you need to do before you pour is mark the locations of the rebar on the form boards. And basically what you do is take a pencil, mark the wood on each course that runs in both directions on the grid that you made out of rebar, so that when you drill into the concrete you don't hit the steel. Another way to approach this is you can use J bolts and place the J-bolts in when you pour. If you do that, we highly recommend that you get a piece of 3/4 inch plyboard, set the MB on top of it, mark the holes, drill them, bolt the J-bolts to the plywood so that they're accurately held in position, and then take the plyboard and set the plyboard with the J-bolts attached into the wet concrete so you have precise location of the J-bolts. And you would use 1/2 inch J-bolts by approximately 8 to 12 inches long. We also recommend that you use a 3000 plus PSI concrete. It's available at any hardware store or Lowe's or Home Depot, and make sure that it never dries out during the cure of the 14 to 21 days. Keep it moist, and if it does dry out, it stops curing. Adding water at that point won't help, so throw some plastic or something over it to maintain the moisture around the excavation soil and the top of the pour. Now you can mount the MB832 after it's cured. Set the MB832 on the pad. Make sure you know where the rebar is located inside the pad. Line up the holes, use a 1/2 inch hammer drill, drill in about 4 to 6 inches, and allow for another 1.5 inches above the slab pour, or 2 inches above the slab pour, for the studs to come out. And place the studs in, set the MB832 on top of it, and tighten it up. And we normally use like a red head or an expanding anchor type stud, that when you tighten the nut on the stud, that it pulls the wedge up and locks it into the concrete. But it's important to let the concrete come to a really good cure so you don't crack the concrete or have a weak connection when the stud expands. So it's important that the concrete is at near full strength. And at 21 days it is pretty close. 14 would be the very minimum that we would recommend to have the concrete cure before anchoring it. And that's it. You're ready to go. You can attach your arm now, and it's good to use. If you have any questions, you can contact us here at 775-588-1475 option 1, or go to the barrier site www.barrier-gate.com. Look in the MB832 sections, and you'll see drawings and videos and other information that have to do with the MB832. Thanks for listening.